Welcome, everybody, to Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I'm going to talk about Xenoblade Chronicles 2. To start with Xenoblade, I have to actually go back a little bit further in history to 1997 and 1998, because this is where this franchise known as Xeno started. My interest in Xeno goes way back and actually started with Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3. And this is going to inform a lot about what I say about Xenoblade 2 and whether I enjoy it, don't enjoy it, or just have mixed feelings about it. Xenoblade 2, I kind of skipped from Xenoblade 1 and X to 2, so I also don't have that missing link there. I did not have a Wii or a Wii U at the time, so Xenoblade 2 being on the Switch is kind of that gap there, so that will explain that. I'm also not going to go into too many spoilers. I'm going to try and talk about this stuff without spoiling too much because of just Xenoblades and Xeno games in general tend to be very story heavy and very dense and have a lot of interesting things to say. So I will do my best to talk about the plot, a couple hours in, but then not go overboard with it so people can make up their own mind. That being said, I do want to talk about how it started. So Xenogears was made in 1997, 1998 by an offshoot of Squaresoft. People were making Final Fantasy VII at the time. Some people decided to make Xenogears under the Squaresoft umbrella, didn't have a full budget for it, and it ended up becoming one of those notorious things where they had a good idea, but it got overstretched their budget and led to Disc 2 being cut short. So the legacy of Xenogears, at least not my interpretation, I tend to be a little less favorable of Xenogears when I played it the first time. I see what they were going for, but I'm not going to take this comparison lightly. Neon Genesis Evangelion, if you heard the horror stories of how they lost their budget or how they approached finishing up their story, same thing applied. They had a budget, overstretched it, had to cut corners, and Disc 2 decided to be like I'm going to sit in a room with a chair and tell you the story that we couldn't finish in Disc 1, and then here are some dungeons and final boss fights and stuff. Kind of funny, because at the time I didn't really like Disc 1, so I actually liked Disc 2, but I will say that as its own thing. What I did enjoy about Xenogears was the battle system, and the story was fairly serious. It was a serious story. So Xenosaga, again, much like Evangelion, use a bunch of religious terms, use a bunch of philosophical mumbo-jumbo to describe space aliens and androids and space alien pedophiles who can't die and just samurai people in space with mechs and stuff. I don't understand what Mary Magdalene has to do with a killer robot Terminator lady, but whatever. I'll talk about those when I talk about those in their own videos. But to inform, I have a keen interest in Xenosaga. Xenogears is Xenoblade 2 is the most recent game I've played, and with that comes its own issues. Still a good game. It has a lot going for it, but I do want people to know that it's not going to be the most glowing review. It's going to have some things I enjoy, some things I don't like, and some things I do like about it. Par for the course, really. But I don't want this to come off as me being pissed at the Xeno franchise for one reason or another. I personally just don't like Xenogears a whole lot, so sue me. So it wasn't my thing. Xenoblade is okay. I don't think it's as good as Xenosaga 1, but it does have a lot of good things going for it. So the first thing I will do is go over some of the plot nuances of this game, because it's self-contained, even from its own Xenoblade stuff. So you do not need to play Xenoblade 1 or X to play this. Sorry about moving my chair. So in the game of Xenoblade, in the world of Xenoblade, 500 years ago, every landmass was destroyed via a war or some other catastrophe. All that's remaining are a series of floating land masses. Imagine these gigantic, like continental sized dragons known as titans, for lack of a better term. People and cities and monsters and all sorts of things can live in or even inside these titans. They're sentient beings, but they're just gigantic floating land masses. There's about 5 to 10 different ones. And that's kind of it. Everything else is left in this like sea of clouds or this like gigantic water sea. And people fly using the Titans, or they use ships, and it's a nice, neat visual. It's a very good adventure setup. And 500 years ago, there was a catastrophe again. So before this happened, this guy decided to climb this gigantic fuck off tree known as the World Tree. The story of Yggdrasil. It's been used in other shows, anime, games, mythology, that sort of thing. So the World Tree exists. Some guy decided to climb it one day, and he found what was known as an Aegis, the strongest blade in existence. A blade, for lack of a better term, is a person not dissimilar to humanity, but kind of like... It is very hard to describe. They're basically crystallized humans that come into being and are summoned creatures. Think of what a summoned creature in Final Fantasy X would be if you could talk to them, right? And they have their own emotions, they have their own wills, and they still protect their drivers, which is the people who summon them. But for all intents and purposes, they are summoned creatures that either look human or animalistic, you name it. But of those, the strongest one is known as the Aegis. So this guy who climbed this world tree, probably due to the issues going around down in the world below, found 2 separate parts of the core in one. One was known as Pyra, and one was known as Malos. Malos ended up being the one he chose. Unfortunately, that was the one that had all the mean-spirited anger issues and just disdain for humanity. So the good side and the evil side. So Pyra is left in some motion somewhere. Technically, blades can't die unless their cores are shattered or pierced or whatever, so they're essentially immortals. But they don't have memories of their past lives. They go into a lot of good detail about how blades exist with their drivers and like what this all entails, and it's a good side story, and it really informs why it makes such a big difference that Pyra is this good side and Malos is this evil side trying to do all this crazy stuff of blowing up the world and whatnot. So we know who our main protagonist and antagonists are. We go forward in time. Malos is looking for Pyra because, hell, it's more powerful. Might as well grab it because he knows all how powerful it is. He wants to find it. He doesn't know how. So he finds a way to coerce Rex, our main character, into salvaging it for him. Rex is an orphan who works for the Argentum Trade Guild, along with someone he knows as Gramps, who's his own Titan. And he goes to Argentum and he gets coerced into this job by the allure of money, because of course you are. They find Pyra in the bottom of the sea in this fuck-off deserted ship somewhere. Malos tries to shoot him, and then in the process, Pyra wakes up. And Pyra notices that Rex is bleeding out or whatever. And it's, they don't show the blood or the death or whatever, but Pyra essentially says, I will give you half my life if you do this favor. This favor is I want to go to Elysium. Elysium is the top of the world tree, so not many people can go there. The only person who did was the guy who found Pyra and Malos, and nobody else has done that since. So you have your game set up. You have Rex surviving the encounter and fighting off Malos and his band of misfits in Torna and running away with Pyra, and now they're fugitives, I suppose. They cross paths with Torna a lot, but they're not really fugitives, I would say. They're fugitives against dealing with Malos. But you'll know your antagonists when you see them. You know your protagonists when you see them as well. But for all intents and purposes, Rex and Pyra are on their own. They are, however, joined by a member of Torna as well, known as Nia. And most of them just set off in this journey. It's driven by Pyra wanting to go to Elysium, Rex being the dopey protagonist guy who can't say no, will try and help her out with that. So Rex is the main driver, Pyra is the blade, and alongside with them is Nia and Dromark. So Nia was a member of Malos's gang of misfits who tried to kill Rex for Pyra's services. She finds her way into a prison, because of course she does, and Rex breaks him out because he's a nice guy, and Nia just joins. And she's joined by Dromark, this gigantic white kitty thing. Think of Raja from Aladdin, like Jasmine's pet tiger thing, if it was like white and light brown instead of the normal tiger stripe looking. But that's essentially what he is. He's a talking tiger. So Nia is the best character in the game, and it's not even funny. It's not even fair. So even though Pyra is the main female lead, Naya is the one who steals the scenery, because she likes Rex, sort of. She doesn't like Rex, sort of. She's just like, you people are such idiots. And she's got this like thick ass accent, and I'll talk about it now. A lot of the localization for the recent Xenoblade games have been done in Europe, so a lot of European and British actors. And the person they got for Naya, I'll look up her name because I've got it here. It was Catherine Mayhew. Hopefully I got that pronounced right. And I bring her up because her voice is very thick. It's like a thick, really weird Welsh accent, and it's just very thick. Think of like a deeper female voice, but then you've got that crazy Welsh like tinge to it. It is a thick style British or UK style accent, or even the like half Irish thing. I don't know where to describe it. Just the way she talks and how she talks and how she interacts with people is the best. And every time she levels up, she says something like, I'm getting much stronger. It's like she doesn't even say much. She just says much. Just the way she would phrase words, it's so good. And then just the interplay, because she's not taking Rex's bullshit seriously, but she knows that she likes him a little bit, because that always happens, right? So they are always together, and Nia acts as kind of the healer, and Rex is the main fighter type, right? So Nia heals, Rex fights off, and they do their own thing. Eventually, they go to some areas and they keep finding other characters. The next one is, oh god, I saw the list and I was like, fuck. So in the Xenoblade world, we have these little Moogle looking things that are like, think Moogles from Final Fantasy. Yeah, Final Fantasy. If they had like little chocobo wings around their ears that wrap around their faces and stuff. And they're called, Nopon. I was going to say Tora, but that's the character's name, Nopon. Basically, they keep saying stupid stuff, and they keep saying meh, 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 and it's just, they're so annoying. But we've got one of them as our in our main party, and he's comic relief. So Tora shows up in the next city over. His whole idea is that he is creating a robot or an android to act as an artificial blade. So most blades are humanistic or, anthropomorphic creatures. In this case, since he cannot like bond to a core, himself. He creates one that he can artificially bond to, and that is Poppy. And Poppy's great. Except the problem is she's taught everything by Tora, and as I've said, Tora sucks, and he's a weirdo, and he thinks these weird things, and he keeps teaching Poppy these weird things. A lot of them have to do with sexual acts and weird stuff, and as cool as it is to see Poppy like dance around like a weirdo and like that, she makes all these weird like dog noises and at times, or she says all this stupid stuff like Master Pawn's a perv. You get where you're going at. And the less said about Tora, the better. I'm going to reference him solely because Poppy exists and Poppy is great, but otherwise, nah. He's there because Poppy's there. Moving on. The character I like the most, and I've said before, I like Nia as my favorite character, but the character I actually used as my main character is Morag. And as much as I like Rex, he's the dopey protagonist. I hate those. I hate dopey protagonists who are earnest to a fault, but stupid. I'm kind of sick of that. Thankfully, in this game, you can choose whichever character you want to use as your party member. And I decided to use Morag, because Morag is basically Beatrix from Final Fantasy IX if she was a police officer. I mean, I'll take that. She's essentially Beatrix from Final Fantasy IX. Not as, like, memorable as Beatrix, because she's not trying to kick the party's ass most of the time. She does, and she's good at it. But she's the I'm not taking your shit. She's very good at her job. She's here for a reason. She's here to protect her kingdom of Morardain from whatever the fuck is going on. And she joins the party begrudgingly after a while. And I just used her in the party because I like those types of characters. I like the strong, like, take no shit type of characters. And Morag is the I'm here to just do my job and get paid and go home, you know, but without the dopey connotations of I'm the main character, so I'm an idiot teenager. Morag doesn't fault that. She watches everybody else be stupid and just stands there and it's just like, well, this is funny. I mean, it is funny, but again, her interaction with her blade, known as Brigid, is some of the best stuff that's there. I said before, the interplay between, because they're actual characters. The blades themselves aren't just summon creatures that you can, summon once and forget. In Morag's case, Brigid is almost like a sister or like a war compatriot kind of thing. So they kind of like inform the party about how blades coexist with each other. And Rex learns a lot of how to deal with blades because Morag and Brigid are just there as the stoic kind of leaders of the party. You know, those Orin types, right? Not mentor-ish. I don't think Morag would be what I consider mentor-ish, but if there was one, she would be that character. Because there are other characters in the game that do that for Rex, but they don't last as long. Morag, as far as a full-on, I'm in the party for the rest of the game kind of thing, I'm the person you turn to when you need somebody to defend you. Her job is to be the tank. She's a paladin. She does it very well, and I liked doing that. I liked playing a defensive style in this game, and I'll talk about the battle system later. Morag was my favorite character to use because it was just easy. Nobody was hitting me for damage, or if they were hitting everybody else. All I had to do is play defensive. So it was kind of neat. The last main party member is known as Zeke. And this guy is strange. I'm trying to find a good an analog for that character, and I can't really come up with one. He's the guy who thinks he's the hero and does all these blustery things, and I don't know. Jack Sparrow is not the right term for it, right? The guy who talks a big game but is kind of a dork, but you actually know he's actually really good at it. It's the anime trope of the dude who stands in the middle of the field and is making all this proclamation about, I'm the hero of the world and I'm going to defeat you, and then you defeat him in 5 seconds flat. But then he joins the party, and Zeke is actually pretty good. He's a heavy class. He's a heavy hitter, so he's kind of nice to use on every occasion. I personally didn't use him in my playthrough, but I do like him as a character because once you get past his, like, I'm a person made of bad luck and I'm just a big blustery guy with big blustery words, you find out he's actually well-meaning and well-to-do. And he's joined by Pandoria, who, not as memorable as, say, Bridget. She holds her own, and her job is just basically to say Zeke is an idiot. Don't mind him. So you have your main characters, and they're still doing their thing. Again, the story is driven by Rex and Pyra. They are trying to get to Elysium, but along the way, they're fighting off Torna. And Torna is the name of a villainous compatriot of bounty hunters, blades, drivers, whatever, that sort of thing. Malos and Jin, Malos being the one we talked about before, Jin is actually more referenced in some side content known as Torna the Golden Country. I will try to avoid Golden Country for now, just because Xenoblade 2 is enough of a story on its own. But suffice it to say, Jin joins up with Malos due to issues stemming from the war 500 years ago, and you have your main antagonist. Jin is Sephiroth. He's basically Sephiroth. That's all you need to know. He acts like Sephiroth. He looks like Sephiroth, sort of. That sort of like good-looking dude with heavy sword. You know that. So Malos and Jin kind of lead the Torna group against us every so often, and they blow shit up. We try to stop them, and then we also try to help other countries not get blown up instead, all the while trying to go to Elysium. And that's as most as I can do without going into really heavy spoilers. What I will say is that going to different countries around the world and different titans is a really cool experience, and it's a very interesting physical space, because a lot of places are interconnected, and you have your castles, you have your ice levels, you have your whatevers. You have that in this game, but they're all disjointed, disconnected in this cloud sea. They're smaller scoped places. Some of them are very large land masses, but they don't feel cliche in most cases. You have them, but they all feel like they're living places. They're gigantic places. People living there are different people, different races, different cultures, different kingdoms. And they do a good job of making it feel like, yeah, this place was blown up about 500 years ago, but people are still trying to make a living within these titans. So it's a unique setup for a video game plot. And the battle system is very, very unique in its own right. I said before that I was going to spend a lot more time talking about battles and the blade system, because really, as much as I like the story and as much as I like some of the characters, the gameplay, for better or for worse, is really what's going to give you the most bang for your buck in this video game. But I'm going to spend a hell of a lot of time talking about blades and cores and the gacha system first. I don't even want to get into the battles yet. I just want to dive into the gacha system. Because the gacha system is where you either like this game or you hate it. So, I said before that your main character is a driver. So, Rex, Naya, Morag, those people. They're drivers. You're your main humans or Nopons or whatever. They're the ones you control in battle. The blades are your party members. They're synced up to you. Think of summons from Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy XII who are in the battlefield and you control them. But they also, it's an auto battle system. So you only have so much limited control. The best you can do is use skills. You can use attacks. You can change your weapon types and whatnot. But essentially what happens is the power of the blade is infused into the main character, so they're the ones doing the damage. And while you have your main ones, your Pyra, your Dromark, Bridget, and such, the ones that are the main extra party members, think of them as like extra party members. They talk. They're storyline driven. They have a lot of good things to talk about. They talk a lot about how drivers and blades exist together, and I think that's the thing I like the most about this game is they spend some time talking about why drivers are important. They have this like little thing about 5 hours in where they test out new recruits of drivers, and they have this core, this inert core, which could be a blade. And these people go up to it like sword in the stone, almost like pulling out Excalibur or lifting up Mjolnir or something like that. If you don't do it right, you die. But if you are able to summon up this blade, you are considered a driver. And there is something to be said about having that ability to be a driver, whether you're doing it for militaristic purposes, bounty hunting purposes, or just for your own salvation. Being a driver matters in this society. And it's one of those things that, you know, a lot of people don't take for granted. It's very impressive. Blades themselves are essentially immortal as long as their crystal or their core still exists. When they come out of a core, they're the same being. Brigid, though, does go over the fact that if your driver dies and you are summoned by someone else, you no longer have memories of that previous driver. You are essentially a different looking, or you're the same looking person with a different personality based on who your driver is. Brigid goes so far as to create a diary for herself. So she will actually try to remember things from her previous life because she knows that Morag's going to be around for a long time. But if Morag dies, Brigid is going to be tied to another driver someday. So the game spends an inordinate amount of time talking about blades and drivers and the interplay and why they're so integral to this world. Because there's other purposes alongside that, like, you know, power sources and other things like that. But for all intents and purposes, drivers need blades and blades need drivers to exist. And because of that, and I don't know if this was a good idea or a bad idea, but the thing that Xenoblade Chronicles is known for is the gacha system. So these blades, you don't just get stuck with the 1 or the 2 or the 3. You can have up to 3 blades in battle, and you can switch in battle. So you can change from Pyra to a different blade on the fly if you have the right cooldown meter for it. So if you wanted to be like a knife wielder instead of a axe user, you could do that. So you have like 4 or 5 different weapon types to use tied to different blades. The other part of it is that there are weaker blades that have like no personality whatsoever. They're just common blades. They look like Tron characters. You know, they just look like Tron characters. Well designed, but they're common. They have the same kind of design. There's like 4 or 5 separate designs for the common blades. Among those are about 50 other rare blades. And these rare blades, as one can imagine, are rare. The cool thing about it is that once you get the rare blade, they're forever in your party. They're tied to whomever summoned said rare blade. So, for instance, if you used Zeke to summon a rare blade, I'll just use a term. Let's say agate. Agate's the name of the ones that I used primarily. So, say Zeke summoned agate. Well, Zeke would then from there on use agate or be given access. There are different times where you can switch between others, or you can use items to switch which character uses which blade. But for all intents and purposes, if you summon a common blade, you can get rid of them or use them in mercenary side quests or whatever. That's just fine. If you get a rare blade, you cannot dismiss them. You don't have to use them in your party. You don't even have to use them in side quests if you don't want to. But those rare blades are forever in your party. And they are summoned via a summoning core system. That's where the gacha system comes into play. And a lot of them are very rare to get. You go into this little like menu, and Rex, Nia, Morag, Zeke, what have you, will stand there, and you will have this core in your hand. It could either be a common, a rare, or a legendary. Commons and rares are what you'd expect. Legendaries are what you'd expect, but they don't guarantee you getting a core that you're looking for. The problem with this gacha system is some of these take so long to get a rare blade. You're just like, oh my god. So there's that excitement of gambling, but there's also that, really, we're doing this again? Because you'll know the difference between a rare blade and a not rare blade immediately. They'll have this like shining effect. Like they'll show you like their chest core, because the cores are in their chest. This like it's like a Jenga piece or a Tetris block, and you will see like an image of that person, and there's that allure of seeing that character, and they have this like 10 or 15-second animation, and then they talk. Some are better than others. Some are definitely better than others, yes. But again, any of these rare blades are better than the common blades in most cases. That's why they're rare blades. But they also serve other purposes. They not only have better buffs and debuffs in battle, but they also serve as their own side quests. So some of them could just be, hey, take me to a place and I'll talk for 5 minutes. Some are like, hey, let's dig up some stuff in this let's dig up some stuff and then I will like learn a thing. Another one is like, hey, let's do some side quests for a mercenary mission and take forever to fucking level that up. One of them is Ursula. And as much as I like Ursula, her thing is she wants to sing, but she's shy as shit, so she doesn't know how to sing. So you have to go into her mercenary mission over and 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 over for like 50 some fucking hours while you're doing other things, and then you will be able to do her side missions. And as much as I like Ursula, the payoff is just that sort of thing. So some of their side quests can be go here, kill a guy, go here, find a guy, go here, buy a thing. You can even get a blade just paying a bunch of money for it. You can find it in a store somewhere. It'll just say, this core, do you want it? It's $500,000, but do you want it? And then you buy it, and then you get to unlock one of the rare cores. Or you do another side quest, and you go through that stuff, and you get that core. So some of them are automatic. Some of them are story-based. Some of them you have to unleash in the gacha system. And again, getting a legendary core off of a monster or from a salvage, because you can go to a salvage point and dig up some cores and whatnot, or you can fight enemies to drop cores. That is what you're gonna have to do. I guarantee you I spent about a third, if not a whole half of my playtime waiting for mercenary missions to fill up and salvaging cores, because my main goal was getting Cosmos. And Cosmos was the main character, or the main battle character of Xenosaga 1 through 3. And her activation rate is something stupid. It's like 1 in 1,000. Which I can attest to. It took me 170 hours to unlock Cosmos. I said to myself, I am going to do this whether I drive myself insane or not. And yes, you get that sequence of seeing Cosmos in action, and you're just like, yes, this made it all worth it. So yes, I essentially played 175 hours to get a cameo. Sue me, I don't care. Cosmos was great. But you could see where if this was made a couple years later, or if they'd wanted to, they could have made this geared towards monetization. They did not do that. Thank God they did not monetize this system. All they really did was make a gacha system inside of a video game as your way to get new characters. It's a pain in the ass. And if you want to get every rare core, good luck. There's like 50 of them. And I've got up to about 45 out of 50. So take it or leave it. The best thing I would suggest is to look up a YouTube channel named Enel, Enel, if I remember right. He actually tiered every single rare blade you get in the game. Some of them are paid DLC, some of them are unlocked through the game, and a lot of that has to do with end game grinding for sure, but you can still kind of gauge what you want out of a rare blade once you get a rare blade. So there's a lot that goes into the gacha system and a lot that goes into the blade system, and that's probably the thing I enjoy the most about Xenoblade 2. Getting back to the battle system itself, it's fine. It's complicated. I don't get it, but I'm okay with it, I guess. I don't like this fixation with auto battles, the MMO style auto battle system that I think started with Final Fantasy 11 or World of Warcraft or whatever. Xenoblade does that thing. Think of it like a Final Fantasy 12 kind of mechanic where you input things. You don't use a gambit system, but you use auto attacks to build up a meter to use skills and whatnot. I think it's fairly similar to Final Fantasy 11. Or auto battling is not really my thing. I like turn-based battles. This is kind of like open-ended action economy. Like you have buffs and debuffs, and your rare blades give you extra buffs and extra skills and extra movement. So every weapon type has their own skill, and every blade has their own buffing system. It's like a big old license board or something. So if you fill in a certain orb on the map, you get a better buff or a debuff or a skill. And some of them have 10, some of them have 50. So the rare blades have full-on license boards, which makes them way stronger than anything else. So you can change your weapon type to suit your needs, or you can change your blade to suit whatever blade you personally like. And I think in general, you can get away with almost anything. I tended to use Morag as a tank, Rex as a damage dealer, and Naya as a healer, and then kind of just left it at that. I didn't really use Zeke or Tora just because I didn't need them really. But you do these auto battles and you do these little skill attacks on a cooldown. Every once in a while, once you build up another meter, you get these markers that say 1, 2, 3, or 4. And those are geared to the blade skills that you can use and do even more damaging types of skills. So they sometimes use QTEs. They sometimes just do way more damage. What they end up doing is they do these rotating orbs, these elemental orbs, fire, water, wind, that sort of thing, around the enemy. And then once everybody can use a certain skill, you go into what's known as a chain attack. So you're using auto attacks, then you're using skills, then you're using bigger skills onto chain attacks. And chain attacks, if you do it right, you can break the elemental seals and then do this crazy fuck ton of damage. On a first playthrough, it's a lot to go on because they throw in a lot of unique mechanics in a action economy system that is very... It's almost too much. For a guy who is so used to just, hey, press X to use magic, press X to attack, press X to run away, that sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff to manage in this type of battle system. They went for an action-based auto-battling MMO-style system, and it can get pretty dense. So if people like to dig into the minutia of that battle system, I'm personally into the more story, character, and music side of things. If you're into the battles being very unique and very dense, you might get a lot out of it and learn a lot by doing so. One of the main issues I have, and this is also something I had an issue with in Final Fantasy VII Remake, was normal mode is way harder than you think because enemies are HP sponges. So if you're just there for the story, the battles themselves are kind of difficult even on normal mode. So I had to decrease myself to easy mode to get through a lot of the battles. And even then, this is one of those games where the level of the enemy kind of informs you what level you need to be to even do any damage. You can make it a couple of levels below or above, but realistically you want to be a higher level than they are, or even way higher to have any chance. The way this game makes it challenging, even on easy mode, is what's known as the rage mode. So every enemy, whether they're small or bosses, has an enrage mode when they're at half health. And when they're at half health, they do way more damage, or they have way more new attacks that fuck you up. And it is a hard game. Because I tend to just be the mindless, I just want to mash and get it over with type. And then there are games that are more into my strengths, but for an action-based game that is a lot about buffing and avoiding damage and stuff like that, it's very tough. I mean, there's other things like using aggro and, using items to buff yourself. You can use items to help, build your license boards for your characters. There's so much stuff into this battle system or this blade system. It's almost, I wouldn't say mind-numbing is the right word. It's too much of a good thing. It is a long game. It is a dense game. It is a strong game. So they put a lot of effort into a lot of different systems, and sometimes the word is exhausting. The word I'll use is exhausting. If you're there just for the story, the battle system or the item manipulations or the blade system can be a little too much to handle sometimes. But again, they throw so much stuff at you that it's almost like, hey, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because they added so much. It's better to have so much stuff and not use it rather than not have enough and then feel like they missed out on something. The other thing I do want to mention is the music, because the blade system is my main draw. The characters are fine, but they're, nothing you've never seen before. The battles are take it or leave it. But the music is awesome. And again, it comes down to having a good composer. Yasunori Mitsuda was the composer for the original Xenogears and the first Xenosaga game. He was also the composer, or the main composer, for Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. So that should tell you how good the music in this game is. Now, in this game, he also had help in the form of Ace. And I have the names here. It was... actually, there was like 4 or 5 other people who composed it with him. He was the main, think of like an executive producer sort of thing. So Mitsuda did most of the music, but he also had a lot of help with this. It's Kenji Hiramatsu, Manami Kyoda, and then Ace, Tomori Kudo, and Hiroyo Yamanaka. So 4 or 5 different composers under this umbrella of just, let's just make one game with like 5 composers, right? And I think Mitsuda did a lot of the in-game cutscene work because that's what he focused on with Xenosaga 1, and then left the other composers to do in-game battles, the in-game field work, and all that stuff. And I love the cutscene work and stuff because it's very reminiscent of Xenosaga and Chrono Cross. I could hear a lot of that Mitsuda style in there. But really, for me, the draw of this was in the field. So I said before that every area is kind of divided into these, there's these 6 or 7 main hubs, right, for the entire game. Each one of them has their own field theme when you're, fighting monsters on the field. And another thing about the battle system before I get to that is you can actually fight higher level enemies in the same areas as scrubs. So you have to be very careful of who you're fighting and when, because sometimes you, without knowing it, you're in an area with level 5 monsters, but a level 70 monster's right up a hill. Thank you, Gormati. I hate you. I hate that level so much because there's a fuck-off flyer that's a level 75 when I'm trying to fight level 10 monsters. Anyway, so take, for instance, you're in that second area. You're in Gormati, this big field, this open field, this, you climb up vegetation, you climb up these jungles. How do you get across it? How do you deal with that? Well, while you're walking around this gigantic field and this gigantic titan, you're immersed in this like 5 to 10 minute like epic sweeping score. And every single area, whether it's the ice level, whether it's the imperial area of More Ordain, Gormati, which is more of a kind of a rustic foresty area. Argentum is no real fights, but it's its own trade guild, so you got like a bombastic like commerce feel to it. So every area has its own like awesome theme attached to it. But even more than that, the towns themselves have their own themes. But even more than that, the fields and the towns have night themes. And the night themes are some of the best music you can come up with, because they're subdued and they're just nice and quiet, and they have different instrumentations. You get these like bombastic drums and trumpets and saxophones and all this crazy stuff in a bombastic day cycle, but when you hit the nighttime, it's these flutes, it's these violins, it's these keyboards that just, or these soft guitars that really change the dynamic of the entire area, and it never gets boring because they're so good. And again, I don't know if Mitsuda himself dealt with the field themes or he just loaned them out. But remember, you have 5 people making all of these different things: cutscenes, battles, field themes. And then they went so far as to make multiple battle themes and multiple day-night cycle themes for every single area. And it just makes the soundtrack so awesome. And they're so memorable even now, because it's such a fairly recent game, but they still did something so cool. Because I don't think I've ever seen that before. To have day-night cycles and then have the music. It's one thing to have like 1 or 2, like in Ocarina of Time or something, but to have every single city and every single continent have their own separate day-night cycle and day-night themes was amazing. So it made traversing these areas fun every single time, because you get to hear that rush of that music again. And again, I've had issues with the battles, sure. And I would say a lot of the issues with the game are mechanical rather than so I'm going to go into the negatives first, and I'm going to talk about the positives later. The negatives are all of the gacha bullshit. Because when you're trying to just get a character that you want, whether they look good or they're Cosmos and they're just super fucking hard to get, like a 0.05%, like 0.0005% chance, like 1 out of 1,000 or something crazy like that, and you're just sitting there opening all these fucking blades and you only get the one that you didn't want, and then you find some, like 10 more, and then you finally get them. I've spent an hour salvaging blades just to get common blades over and over and over, and it gets exhausting. And it gets harder the more that you get, because you're just like, well, I want to experience everything the game has, but you're telling me that I can't just find it. There's not some side quest to just find this one. You're telling me that a large majority of these blades are stuck in these cores, and I've unlocked these cores over and over and over again. I probably unlocked about 500 to 700 cores all throughout the game just to get Cosmos. And I was just like, dude, I'm done now. Because I was near the end of the game and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing anything. I'm done. I got what I wanted. I'm done. And I have proof. I had to take a picture of proof of getting Cosmos, because sometimes you don't believe it. Sometimes you get Cosmos really early out of nowhere, and then sometimes you're like me, where you get Cosmos because you did so much freaking work to get there. So I had to take a picture of it just to make sure I got it, and I was like, okay, I didn't fuck around, I didn't fail that. But again, some people never got Cosmos and it drove them nuts, and they're like, well, yeah, they made her hard to get, which, as long as it wasn't paid for, it's fine. It was an unpaid gacha system, but it's exhausting because you just want to get the ones you want and then do the side quests you want. You don't have to do any of these side quests, but it's ridiculous how much stuff is involved. There's also the map traversal. This game doesn't really do invisible walls all that much. So when you're in an ice level and it's multi-leveled and you got like here's the bottom, here's the mid, here's the top level. Gormati is a early game issue with this because it's a lot of like forests and trees and vines and shit. If you misplace a step because you're trying to run away from an enemy that's higher leveled from you, you have to climb all the way back up again. They do have a lot of fast travel. Yes, I like the fast travel. You can go from any area to the next while you're doing cutscenes and side quests, but that's fine. But when you're trying to actually go to an area, trying to find the specific spot in the map, especially on a map that is like 4 or 5 levels high, gets exhausting because it's not just a level map. Sometimes I just wanted a level map with a objective marker right there so I could see it, as opposed to being hidden between the trees and in this dungeon and in this forest somewhere. And invisible walls are there for a reason, because they stop you from falling off a thing and having to be frustrated over and over because you couldn't make the jump or couldn't make the traversal or couldn't walk. So I'm on the side of, I wish they had invisible walls, and I wish they would have had handholds and things where you wouldn't have slipped and fell so much. So that one's annoying. The other thing for me, and this was my main issue with Xenoblade, not so much my second time through, but when I first experienced this game, I was watching somebody stream it all the way through. And I will admit, playing a game versus streaming a game, there's always that disconnect of whether it's a stream or a play type of thing. But I came into it expecting a very serious narrative because I grew up with Xenosaga, and for all its faults, Xenosaga is very serious. It has some stupid comedy here and there, but on the whole, it's not a joke. A lot of things in this game are played for laughs or played for stupid. Tora does a lot of things, and Poppy do a lot of things that are like really stupid. I talked before about how Tora teaches Poppy what like pornographic material is, or they go and look for pornographic material because they think it's an instruction manual, like some treasure, but it turns out to just be a porn magazine. Like Poppy like gives Tora massages or something. It's really stupid. Like Tora's played for comic relief, and Poppy is along with him, which is kind of sad because I like her, but and that's not even the worst part of it. Like anytime I keep thinking that the game is going to be super serious, when they get to a cutscene where they have to do the anime shonen thing where like, I'm not dead yet, I will use my superpower and I will kill you. It's the super cheesy ultra kill death move in cutscene where Rex or Naya or somebody else just powers up out of nowhere and they just kill the guy, and it's just the cheesy anime like instant survival mechanic, right? And it gets a bit much, and they're fun, I'm not gonna lie, but it gets exhausting. But the worst part of it is a mid-game boss fight where you're going to this factory and you're chasing this guy down who's been using another android, whatever, robot, whatever, as an assassin or just a surveillance robot or whatever. And he's like, I am not going to let you catch me. I'm going to do this thing. And it turns out that he made like this gigantic fucking Megazord looking version of the character that was following you around before. So the boss fight is with this gigantic like made robot that's like 100 feet tall. And I looked at it and I thought, I played a game franchise that was about biblical space drama and a dude having a fetish with a doll, and now I'm subjected to this. I'm staring at the screen and I'm thinking, what happened? And apparently what happened was they were trying to go for a less serious, like a more like Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe with the story and some of the stupid. And I'm like, that's not... if you're not into that, sometimes this game can grate on your nerves. Which is frustrating because once the game gets past a lot of that goofy bullshit, and we'll get into the positives now, right around the midway point of the game, when you get to a church area and you start learning a lot of the lore and a lot of the why Malos is doing the thing he's doing, or why Pyra and Bridget are doing the things they do, the game shifts into the mode that I personally wanted the game to turn into. A very serious, very dramatic, and honestly very exciting game towards the end of it. They dumped a lot of the stupid, unless you actively looked for it on the Torah side quests and stuff like that, unless you were actively looking for the stupid or the comedy, you weren't getting it anymore. I wanted this Xenoblade, and I finally got it. It took a long time in the story. It took about 6 or 7 chapters in, but you get it. And once the shift happens, you start thinking, okay, now I'm invested in the story, because the music and the characters were still very strong. And even with my issues of the blade charts and all that stuff, like how you build the gacha system and how you fight the things and how you do side quests, there's so much in the game to do. There's mercenary side quests. There's filling different items for your blades so they get better skills. There's just filling out their charts in general requires doing the side quest or finding this item, and these items are off in the middle of nowhere. There's buying title deeds for item shops. There's so much stuff that you can do, and the level of complexity that this game provides is some of the craziest I've ever seen in a video game. I don't think I've ever played a game as long as this. I technically think Persona 5 Royal has more of it, but I don't think I've played as much of a game as I played Xenoblade Chronicles. A lot of that had to do with the mercenary system. It was a timed mechanic, sure, but overall, I think my playthrough was about 200 hours. I have never played a game that long before, and it's not even close. So there is, and I didn't even scratch the surface. I didn't get every blade. I got close, but I didn't get every rare blade. I didn't finish their side quests. I didn't fill their charts. I remember a guy saying he was able to finally finish every blade and every chart within like 300 hours. And that's not even talking about Torna and the Golden Country, which is its own game in and of itself. So they put a lot of effort into this game. That being said, if it's not for you, you don't really have to. You can just do the story missions, and I think the story missions would be about 60 to 80 hours, if that. It would really depend on how hard the battles are. But I would not have been as enthusiastic with this game if I didn't have a character to gravitate to. And I said that my main character in battle was Morag, but the main character that I was interested by was Naya. And Naya goes through this transformation as a character. You know, she likes the guy, she doesn't like the guy, she doesn't know what her place is in the world, but she comes across as this not the badass, but I'm just trying to make a living and I'm trying to survive because I don't really have a choice. But she's always there as a supportive person, but she's also I'm not gonna take your bullshit. She's no nonsense, and she's the best character in this entire game, because unfortunately for Pyra, she comes off as kind of this demure damsel in distress type most of the time, and it's I like you, but I don't like you. And then Naya is just there fuck it, let's just go, let's just kick ass, let's go and kick these fuckers' asses, that type of get her and go type of person. And Naya is the best thing about this game, aside from the blade system, which for better or for worse, the things that this game does well, it does very well. It's not everything I wanted. Xenoblade 2 is an exhaustive game. They went above and beyond to give you content. It's not always the best content, and some of it can drive you up a wall depending on how much you do of it and how much you get out of it. But in terms of just this sheer amount of stuff at play, whether it's just going through the story, you get a lot from the story. if you're just there for the gacha system, like I was, getting new blades and luckily maybe getting Cosmos once, or even just doing side quests. You just want to do side quests and fill out charts and stuff, or just wander around beating the shit out of high level enemies. You can do all that, and along the way you get all these like unique little things that you get to try and learn. So even though I may not be the biggest fan of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the stuff that it does well is too good to ignore. And it's one of the most expansive games, if not the most expansive game I've ever played. I don't know if I'd want to do it again. You know, I don't know if I'd ever want to go through that kind of thing again, like in some other game. But for an experience, it is up there with some of the best experiences I've ever had for an RPG. So I would definitely recommend at least playing it one time. And you might get a lot out of it, or you might even just say, hey, I know somebody else who could get something out of it, because that would be their thing. I think this can appeal to a lot of different people, and I'm excited. I was very excited to talk about this one. But that will do it for me today. I got to get ready for work, so hopefully I didn't talk too damn long today. Anyway, next week starts off Cowboy Bebop. I'm working my way through Cowboy Bebop. I'm already up through about 20 episodes, and I've watched it a million times. I could talk about it in my sleep, so I'm going to talk about the anime version next week. And then I will watch the live action on, I think it comes out the 19th of November. So we're getting close. And then next time after that is, I believe, Breath of Fire 3. I'll have to check my notes and make sure. It's either Breath of Fire 3 or Phoenix Wright. I think it's Phoenix Wright, but I could be wrong. I believe it is Phoenix Wright, and then Breath of Fire 3 is the next thing. But I've got a whole host of games I can talk about. I got a whole host of anime I can talk about. So I'm not lacking for things. So we'll just go week by week and see where things go. But if you were interested in this at all, or if you know anybody who would be interested in learning about these podcasts or learning about these games or these animes, feel free to like, share, or subscribe. Thank you so much for listening to me. Citizen Strife, signing off.